We're looking today at efficiency versus effectiveness, and whether it's a collision of the two metrics or whether there's some happy balance between the two of what we're looking at. So just taking us through our panel. Delighted to welcome Carolyn Blunt back to our webinars. I know Carolyn's a bit of a webinar star in our webinar series. You've attended quite a number, and you always bring in a good crowd to hear you speak. And I've got to say today is no different from that. So welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you. I'm glad you said star and not veteran. So that's always good.
And you've been looking at this as a topic for quite a while. I know you've been doing some work. Without spoiling your thunder, any sort of any gems you sort of want to highlight that you're going to cover later?
Well, I think if you get this right, you can make some really significant returns on your investment, and that will come in from employee engagement, retention, customer satisfaction, FTE efficiencies, loads. So, yeah, I'm hoping that people will be able to take this away and apply it and get some really good wins out of it.
And also delighted to welcome back to a webinar with us Leon Stafford from Interactive Intelligence. Welcome, Leon.
Thank you very much. Nice to be back.
And you'll be joining our panel today, and I guess also looking at the way that technology can enhance both, I guess, efficiency and effectiveness in terms of some of the things you can do in the contact center.
Yeah, I mean, technology is probably to blame for some of the mess that the operations are involved in right now, trying to manage multi-channel, omni-channel, social media. So finding a way of getting a return from the technology is what I would like to help people to achieve. Excellent.
Well, if you want to watch a replay of the webinar today, that's available later on this afternoon, callcenterhelper.com/recorded-webinars. We're running a chat room alongside today, and the chat room, here's the address, it's callcenterhelper.com/chat. Just simply put in your first name, last name. It's quite useful to have the webinar slides on one side, the chat room on the other side of your screen, so that you can see both going through. You can click on this link here to download the webinar slides, and if you want to join and introduce yourself, we've got a few more people who've joined us. We've got Kim from Indianapolis, Jessica from Cardiff, Zoe who's calling in from Serco in Bolton. We've got Alawale calling in from Nigeria, probably our furthest one today. We've got Parveen from Serco in Bolton. We've got Selena calling in from Slough. We've also got Nanya's just joined us, so if you'd like to join us in there. There is an added advantage of being in the chat room, is that we are giving a prize of a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates for the best tip. So if you've got a tip, just use the hashtag #tip in the chat room so we can know it's a tip. Or if you've got a question to ask, use the hashtag #question. And if you know the answer to any of the questions, just put that into the chat room. It would be great. So looking at efficiency versus effectiveness, I just wanted, before we go in today, to look at some of the metrics we use, because in a way that's one of the things that tends to drive a lot of the other behaviors. And here's some research that came up. This is now 7 years ago, but I'm using this as a sort of contrast of how things have changed over time. This is research that Richard Snow at Ventana Research did back in 2009, when he said, what is the importance of the metrics to you? And what he found is the number one metric that came up was the average length of a call, followed by effectively first contact resolution quality scores, and then a sort of whole range of other factors came through. And I think he made the point then that a lot of the schools weren't really particularly looking at the outcome of a call. A lot of them were very efficiency orientated. Well, if you skip forward now 6 years, we did a survey last year where we asked 645 contact center professionals which metrics are important in your contact center. And we found quite a big difference. What we saw is that first contact resolution and quality scores were very high, but customer satisfaction as a metric had really jumped up to the top of the table. and average handling time had moved down quite dramatically, with only 46% of contact centers saying it was very important. And I think this ties in with a trend that a lot of contact centers have done now, is to stop focusing on average handling time as a metric and looking at, is the customer satisfied or is the contact being resolved. Now that in itself has caused some other problems, and I think Carolyn's going to be talking about that as we go through. So just wanted to set a little bit of metrics there. What I want to do now is just check with with our audience there and here today and see if this sort of validates through what you're doing. So I'm just going to put up 5 metrics up here, which seem to be quite commonly used in contact centers. I've taken customer satisfaction off the list here because that seems to be a top one. Which ones do you use in your contact center? Just so I'm going to launch the poll here. So if you'd just like to vote on the metrics, if you use more than one, you can vote through for all of those. So if you could, sorry, customer satisfaction is on the list. That's the 5th along at the bottom. So if you'd just like to vote on that and use the metrics that you're using in your contact center. Carolyn, do you think there's one that's likely to come up top?
CSAT, I think.
Well, let's have a look at what we haven't said is which is the most important, so this is just which ones you use. So let's have a look. And customer satisfaction does come up very high, but it's not the top one, or not the most widespread one. The most widespreadly used, we have a sample size of 170 for this. We have 71% of people say it's average handling time, 63% customer satisfaction, 52% first contact resolution, 45% net promoter score, which seemed to be higher than we saw on some of the other surveys we had, and 18%, dragging up the last one there, of people are using customer effort score. So I think that's fascinating. If anyone is using customer effort score, it sort of came in a while ago and has sort of always been a niche score. I wonder if you could just type into the chat room how you're using the customer effort score and what you find the benefits have been to your organisation, or whether there's any trends. So if you'd like to type that into the chat room. What I'm now going to do is I'm now going to drill down into one further little bit of detail, and I want to ask a question of how do you use average handling time? Because it seems to be quite a commonly used metric, as we've seen. So just select all that apply in your contact center. So do you target agents based on their average handling time? Do you measure agents for average handling time but don't tell them about it? Do you use average handling time for planning purposes, like for instance for doing a forecast? Or do you not use average handling time in your center at all? So let's have a look at the overall results coming back here. Quite fascinating, and let's share those on the screen with you. So what we see is that 72% of people use it for planning purposes. I've got to say, it is almost impossible to do a forecast of staff levels without some form of average handling time. 47% of people are targeting agents on average handling time. 25% of people are measuring it, but don't tell them, and only 7% don't use average handling time at all. Carolyn, what's your thought on that?
That's really interesting, especially that it's come out as the top metric, and that almost half of the people on this webinar are targeting on it as well. So that's made me rethink that, you know, I'm preaching to the converted, I guess, when it comes to kind of using this metric and not throwing it out the window, which is what I was kind of believing more people were doing. So targeting, though, I'm still a little bit apprehensive about. So I'd need to understand exactly how that was working within your contact centre. I'm not a fan of using it as a harsh target, but instead as a coaching conversation tool.
Leon, I don't know if you've got a view on whether people should be targeting average handling time.
Well, kind of. It's quite interesting, I think, that the results of the previous poll around the type of metrics that are most popular, let me see, the results came in almost in order of how long those technologies and those metrics have been in the marketplace. So I think it's quite interesting then that average handle time has been in the marketplace the longest. It's still the tried and tested, and it would be very likely that it's used for planning purposes. Customer effort score, which is a much newer technology, a much newer approach, had a much lower uptake, but it is the sort of the current thinking.
I think there's always a danger with targeting agents on average handling time. One contact center I visited set a 3-minute ceiling on average handling time, and what they found is they were getting towards the end of that 3-minute period. Agents would just hang up on the callers. Which I thought was a law of unintended consequences. And it's almost a message that's saying, if you're targeting people on it, get off that call as quickly as you can and then get on to the next one, whether you've really answered the question or not. So some fascinating bits. Caroline, I'll just hold your fire on yours, because I think you're going to be talking on this topic in just a very short while. Well, just a little bit of feedback from the chat room on customer effort score. So it says we're using customer effort score as part of the launch of our new broker platform. The whole idea is it's easier for customers with self-serve. So customer effort score is a great measure for us to use at the moment. Clara said customer effort reviews soft skills, pitch, pace, volume, voice inflection, signposting, which is I think the topic you might be covering, Caroline. Talking over, effective listening, the right response, general manners. So some quite interesting feedback there. So I think probably now is the time to jump across to Caroline. And Caroline, if you'd like to share with us your ideas about finding the balance between efficiency and effectiveness.
Sure. I will show my screen, and hopefully you can all see that.
We can indeed, yeah. Great.
Okay, and I'll also put my timer on because, I can talk on this topic forever. It's like my favourite thing to do. So, yeah, I'm going to be talking about efficiency and effectiveness, in particular thinking about it in relation to getting the balance between the two things. So just a bit of background. I know Jonty sort of mentioned that I am a veteran, a star, whatever, of the webinars, but what it is 13 years of experience that I'm bringing to you today, having worked with lots of different clients that look like this, and in particular I'm going to be focusing on a project that we've done at Boots, but I'm also going to share some results with you from a very similar project that we've also done at Autoglass. So what I'm coming up against time and time again is what I'm going to be sharing with you. So it's not just something that I've made up. This is stuff that I'm seeing, feeling, noticing in my research everywhere. But my own personal opinion is very much that AHT is not the bad guy, and if it is used incorrectly, that's where that reputation comes from, and that's why I do get a little bit twitchy about targeting agents on it for exactly the reasons you said, Jonty. I think if we rush customers off calls, we just cause repeat call volume, it just gives a bad service. But equally, if we take the focus off it, then we end up with, planning goes out the window, we end up with long wait times for customers in queues, and again, that negatively impacts customer experience. So my passion with this is to make sure that we do keep a focus on AHT, that we don't follow this fashion and trend of removing all the targets and all the visibility of it. And I'm talking about AHT here particularly around talk time. So, you need to work out what's the best way of making your IVR as efficient as possible and your wrap as efficient as possible. But the bit that I'm really going to focus on is the talk time and making that as efficient as we can. So when I'm talking about AHT, it's that bit that I'm referencing. And by taking away the focus on this, what we've actually done is seen an incremental rise in that talk time over 2 years. So call durations with my clients, they're coming to me and saying they've increased over the last 2 years, and they're not particularly clear why, and they're bringing me and my team as consultants in to A, understand what's gone on with that, B, find the opportunities to trim the fat out of that call, and then C, make sure that we're training the frontline teams and supporting them to do well with that going forward. So very much when it comes to looking at talk time as a metric, it's very much how you use it that's important. So definitely be very careful about beating people over the head with it. So how I begin these kinds of projects, and this is what I want to share with you so that you can maybe do this yourself in your own organisations, is to do a research phase. So I call it an immersion package when people come to me for this. I go in and spend 3 to 5 days in the contact centre doing some call listening. So I usually manually listen, but if you've got interaction analytics, then even better. But I'll manually listen first of all, just to pick up some of the things that I might then want to run through the analytics, so that I can find, if I think that that is a trend, I can check and balance that en masse through more like, thousands of hours of calls, which I couldn't manually do. I'll do focus groups, so frontline focus groups, team leader focus groups with other people in the service chain, depending on your organisation, and really find out from them what they think are some of the issues, the problem and pain points in the customer journey. I also want to find out how quality is being used. So quite often I'll ask the team managers, what's your approach to quality, and having coaching conversations with your advisors, and also get the check and balance on that from the advisors. And it's funny how the two things often don't match. And then I'll also do some observations in the contact centre, because I want to understand what the culture is. I want to, again, check the focus group outputs against what I'm seeing, and I also want to see how the agent's desktop is optimised and whether they're spending time flicking through lots of different systems, and basically how they are using what's available to them. So in particular, that is the technology, the knowledge management system that they've got available to them, and also, again, going through that quality framework, is that bringing out the right behaviours. All too often I see an approach to quality which is a little bit dated now, so it's still quite scripted, it's quite rigid, it's tick boxes, it churns out a score, and actually what I want to then move it to is something more holistic, which gives calls a flow and a structure, but gives the advisor some freedom within that to make the right decisions. So from that, I will usually uncover opportunities to increase efficiency straight away before we've even done any training, but then we'll get into the training course itself, and those opportunities will absolutely not affect anything to do with customer satisfaction. In fact, it will improve it, and will also improve sales and first contact resolution. And the reason why being more efficient improves effectiveness is because nobody wakes up saying, I want to ring a call centre today, I want to spend 9 minutes on hold please, I want to sit there while my advisor puts me on hold and goes to ask a mate what they should do to answer my query, because they're not using the knowledge management system properly, or the knowledge management system isn't equipped to do that effectively. So that is why the two things are linked, they're not separate. Looking at talk time and AHT does not cause a detriment to customer satisfaction if you do it properly. The two things should complement each other. So when it comes to then pulling together my findings, and in the particular project that I'm talking about today, knowledge management was a really key part of what I was able to bring to it. They had recently put in a new knowledge management system. Advisors had tried it and then gone, nah, it's not for me. It's much easier to get up out of my chair and go and ask somebody. Quite like doing that. And it's not searchable, it's not quick, the stuff is too wordy, and I'd rather just do my own thing. So there's a whole opportunity around that, because when we look at kind of call durations, and we start to, if you've got interaction analytics, we can pull out how much silence is occurring by advisor across all their calls, and we can understand what's going on, and that is a great opportunity to say, do you know what, is there a training need here, is there a skills or knowledge gap, or are you just using that because you're dating that girl over there and it's a good opportunity to get out and see? Let's be honest, that stuff does go on as well. It's a hard grind doing 100 calls a day, and if I can have a few minutes where I ask you a question but at the same time we plan a drink on Friday night, then so be it. So there's a cultural thing, and this is why I also want to sit in the contact centre and see what's going on, because on a call recording all I would hear is silence. I wouldn't actually see what was happening, so that's really key. And the other thing is to make sure that the client is taking advantage of all the technology that is available to them to make things as efficient as possible, which is why I think we should be looking at customer effort score and why it comes into making it easy to do business with us. So I'll talk a little bit more about speech analytics, payment systems, and I know Leon will answer any questions as well on the tech side. In terms of call content and control of the call, this is where, as a soft skills consultant, I can really do some work. So to give you an example from Autoglass, when I manually listened to 20 calls, I found that in all of those calls, the advisor was following a script where they ask customers, in the event of bad weather, do you have a carport, double garage, or somewhere undercover where we can continue to repair your windscreen? And in all of those calls, it caused a conversation where the customer said, well, you know, I have got a double garage, but it's full of junk right now. Or, or I've only got a single garage, or I've got an oak tree in my garden was one response, which is really big, and that might provide some shelter. Do you think that'll work? So it got into this, like, you know, 30 seconds, 60 seconds sideline of irrelevant detail, because in every single call that I listened to, the advisor came back and said, oh, don't worry about it, all our vans have got canopies now anyway. And when I raised that with the client, they said, yeah, there's been a phased upgrade, so we had to leave that in because not all the vans had them, and we were trying to work out which vans to send to which job. So if you didn't have cover, we'd try and send you a van with a canopy, and if you did have cover, we could send you one without. But now that we've got to the stage that all the vans have got canopies, why are we still asking this question? So this is what I mean about being able to strip out, you know, 30 or 60 seconds from talk time straight away we haven't even done any training yet. And with them, we went on to do a 2-day workshop as well that would really help keep control of the call, which is the advisor's soft skill. So when you put the two things together, we make the content as slick as possible and trim out any old fat, and then work on the actual soft skills of the advisors to do the listening and the questioning and stopping things going off on a tangent, and give them that awareness back to AHT and say, you know, we're not beating you up, but we need to think about getting the balance here. Most of them are really receptive to it because they find it quite hard, awkward, or embarrassing when a customer goes off on a tangent and they don't really know what to do to bring it back. And, you know, we put the wallboards back up and said, you know, keep an eye on the queue, because, you know, if you've got a little old lady and there's no one in the queue, then by all means have that little detour conversation. But if you've got somebody who's a busy professional and there's people in the queue, let's just keep control and crack on. So there's a lot there about why I don't want quality frameworks and I don't want targets that are really rigid. I want the advisors to flex, to adapt, and to generally be aware of what's going on in their world. And that's where the training is really key to sharing how to do that. So when it comes to starting with the knowledge management piece, I will want to make sure that that is a clean, visual, simple, fast and searchable system which is up to date. And to make it up to date, what I would usually recommend is you've got a point of contact who centrally owns that system, who reviews things regularly and through whom the updates are made. So quite often advisors can flag to that person and say, do you know what, I looked for something on this today and there wasn't, or I looked for something on that today and it was out of date, or here's my take on what we should be doing with XYZ, and they can actually feed that in, but we've got somebody who's controlling that. So definitely going back from this webinar today and having a think about your knowledge management system and also how it dovetails with your self-service strategy, because really for me, when we come to thinking about customer effort score, we want to be looking at, you know, customers who want to self-serve and they do want to increasingly look for their own solutions before having to start a chat or pick up a phone. So again, these two pieces of work can be really complementary. The other thing that's really important for us to think about, and I've touched a bit on the speech analytics, I can't endorse analytics enough. If you've got quality teams and managers who are spending time choosing calls at random, manually listening, fast forwarding, rewinding, it's just it's just like standing in, you know, ripping up money, because you're listening to about 1 or 2% of your call volume manually, and you're missing 98 to 99% of it, and you're spending a time paying a human to do that when actually a system can do that for you, and to much greater effect. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, do some thinking on how you can get some really good benefits. Payment systems is another one. If you are taking payments over the phone, to get the balance here between efficiency and effectiveness, I would absolutely recommend that you are using an automated payment system. If you've got customers who are reading out credit card numbers over the phone, then that's going to take longer. It's likely to cause more errors. Advisors are going to, you know, kind of potentially mishear if they're doing data entry. So having a system where they can actually put that in themselves is really important, but also not just a cold transfer. I'm going to put you through to a payment system, and then when you finish, that's it. You'll go off the call and I'm not there anymore. Actually, one where the advisor is still present. So if the customer makes a mistake, they can speak to the advisor, but that obviously everything is PCI compliant, and that's definitely, again, something I know Leon can answer questions about. And I've touched a little bit on the self-service side, and again, I think, Jonty, from yours and mine's research previously, this is still quite in its infancy in terms of people getting really smart with technology to facilitate this. And one of the examples that I've known about for a long time was British Gas saving an absolute fortune in call handling by making a video on YouTube of how to stop your pipes freezing in winter. So rather than the advisor saying that 20 times a day to customers who wanted to know, they were able to say, if you've got access to the internet, yeah, okay, well, I'll SMS you a link where you can go and watch that at your leisure, which is far better than sitting there and listening to it through the telephone. You can actually see how to do it, and you can go back and look at it again, next winter or whatever. So we can get stuff that's more efficient for the organisation and improves customer experience as well. So the two things, again, should be complementary. Shall we do a poll?
I think we're going to jump across to a poll now. So let's just get the poll lined up here, and we're going to have a look at some of the things that you measure. And the first one I want to look at is, do you measure time on hold and pauses during the phone calls? So question, do you measure time on hold? Do you measure silence or pauses in conversation? Or do you not measure silence and time on hold? This is quite an interesting metric, because I think both silence and time on hold probably indicate you've got something not quite right in your system. Either you don't have the knowledge levels you need, or maybe you've got some slow systems. So let's just close that and share the results on the screen. Leon, this is quite surprising. 46% of the audience don't measure either. 46% measure time on hold, and only 23% measure silence or pauses on conversations. Presumably, speech analytics is the technology that would help you measure silence.
Yeah, absolutely. Speech analytics would allow you to understand this. There are other fiddlier ways of doing it, especially around putting customers on hold. But to do it effectively and to do it in real time, then yeah, absolutely, speech analytics. And speech analytics has a real time and a historical function. So show me all the bad calls from yesterday. Show me all the good calls from yesterday. But likewise, give me a supervisor screen that is flagging up the very good, the very bad, and the silences in real time, so that you can impact the customer experience in real time before they kind of go off and talk to other people about the bad experience they've had.
Indeed. So I think there's a key takeaway here, that if you're not measuring silence and time on hold, now is a good time to start doing that, even if it's just going off and analysing it, listening to a few phone calls and trying to work out what drives that. We just got an opinion sent in by one of our readers. Said, we've noticed a trend in average handling time increasing month on month, and we're using speech analytics and manual listening to look at what's driving that. Carolyn, you got any pointers what might be increasing that?
Well, I don't know anything about the organisation, but obviously it could be, a problem with the product or the service chain further out in the field, which is driving that. It could be something that's increasing in complexity, or it could be a training or a skills need in the contact centre. So again, it depends if you've changed culturally about whether you've been measuring AHT in the past or not. So the two case studies that I'm talking about here, Boots and Autoglass, have noticed almost AHT getting to almost double over a period of time, and that's partly because of changes in systems, procedures, products, and taking the focus off it in the contact centre.
And we've got a question here that I think Leon may be able to help with. What about offline contacts, such as emails? How do you effectively analyse average handling time to achieve proper targets? Leon, you got any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, offline contacts, I would imagine that emails are being routed according to the right SLAs within the contact center, so that all of this is part of the metrics that you're reporting on. How do you effectively analyze average handle time? Well, average handle time for an email is higher. Average expected handle time from a customer perspective is that it will take longer to deal with an email. So all of this is worked into the metrics.
So it sounds like Kim there isn't using any sort of automated system, and probably they've got one great big Outlook box, and people are just choosing and picking, and presumably there's deploying a sort of modern contact center system, you'd get all those metrics included as part of that system.
Yeah, absolutely. You'd want to be routing emails because otherwise stuff just doesn't. It's at the back of the queue, and you only get to it when it becomes a nightmare. And typically, that's when the people whose emails have been in the queue for 4 or 5 days actually start calling you. So it actually creates additional contacts.
Indeed. Well, we've got another poll that I'm going to ask, and it's about which payment methods are you taking for to use in your centre. So the answers are: we don't take card payments. The agent takes card payments over the phone, like manually, speaks the number to the agent who types them in. The customer uses a keypad, but the agent can't hear the tones, where it's all sort of a bit more secure. You transfer the card to an IVR system for payment, or use a self-service card payment system. Again, multiple answers. So if you've got more than one of these solutions, then just select on that. Let's have a look. Sample size of 184 here. Let's just close the results and share them up on the screen. So, Carolyn, this was something you were very interested in.
Okay. Yeah.
Just under half are taking card payments just over the phone.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say to those 48% of people to go and have a look at more efficient ways of doing that. Definitely.
And presumably also the 48% taking card payments over the phone would also need to look at look at PCI compliance as well.
Very much.
Yeah, absolutely. We're finding more and more that organisations see this as a real pain point, and by using a PCI solution that takes all of this risk away from the organisation, doesn't store it on site, anything like that, and really ticks the box for PCI, it's become a huge priority.
Yeah, so I think there's some areas to look at overall. Right, let's just have a look at the some of the comments coming through in the chat rooms. A lot of discussion about average handling time. So Alistair said, average handling time cannot be used in isolation when reviewing efficiency. Process improvement and customer issue management must be addressed, which will directly impact average handling time. Staff behaviour also affects AHD, as well as quality of systems and organisations. We've had Vincent said, targeting average handling time against an arbitrary number isn't helpful. If you measure all the agents and use the team's actual results to measure by it can be very useful. You can rank agents against each other and with the same training and skills. Carolyn, what's your thought?
you need to consider the differences between different agents and their personality styles. And I get asked this question a lot, where you might have one advisor who's really chatty and whose talk time is actually quite a lot more than other people, but their customer satisfaction scores are excellent. Whereas you might have an advisor who's very introverted and businesslike and process driven, and who's accurate, but whose customer satisfaction scores are maybe a little bit lower. So it's about getting that balance, and what is really important is that actually customer satisfaction, it should feel like a nice experience in this day and age. We want to generate promoters. So people say to me, should I make that that chatty agent say less? And I would always say no. So if their customer satisfaction scores are good, leave them alone. But it's when their AHT is long and their individual satisfaction scores are low because they're going on hold, they don't know what they're talking about, they're talking around in circles, then that's where it's a real good flag.
So we're getting a lot of debate about this. Jessica said average handling time should be leveraged in tandem with your customer satisfaction scores and specific feedback. Longer AHT can sometimes signify that your associates are going above and beyond, and then therefore adding value from a customer perspective, which I guess ties in with your point you were making then, Carolyn. Diana says, I see HT as a tool for planning, analysis, and informed change. It is not something that should be actively targeted on for agents. Their focus should always be on quality and customer satisfaction, in my opinion. And Alan has said, we would look at AHT on both sides, i.e. having an AHT for an idea call. So if it's longer or shorter, it could identify training issues. Carolyn?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing where if somebody's AHT talk time is getting really high, and I think the previous opinion said this as well, they can be going above and beyond. But I want to listen into that and be sure that that is what's happening, and not that. We knew about a story where somebody was letting the customer hang up and then not hanging up themselves and then giving themselves a 20-minute break. So it's things like that I just want to have it as a way of being informed. And if you take it away completely, you're just or just using it for planning only and not looking at it from a quality perspective, then you're really missing a trick.
Excellent. So here's a tip, Leon, that's been sent in by Charlie, and that is that we measure ready time to help us plan and forecast. It's important we keep this down and utilize as much downtime or ready time as possible. I'm guessing, Leon, that one of the dangers of using ready time as a target, it might be that people start using wrap-up time in a different way from what you'd expected. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's not a way of measuring that I've come across very often, to be honest. It seems to be turning the regular model kind of on its head a little bit. So honestly, I haven't got a lot to offer on that. I'm sorry, I'm not really aware of it particularly.
Well, if anyone in the audience is using ready time, it'd be interesting if you could leave that in the chat room. Here's a question you might be able to answer, Leon. Lucas said, does anyone use a knowledge management solution software that they use and can recommend? Our knowledge is currently stored in multiple locations, and we're guilty of making this difficult to find and navigate. So have you got any recommendations about knowledge systems or how to use them, Leon?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you get to a point where this is a do we build it or do we buy it type of question. And if you're going to buy it, you look to a real specialist in this area, and that is likely to be someone that's different to someone that delivers your core ACD and routing. However, there are a number of tools within the leading vendors that allow you to have sort of commonly searchable terms and to build one yourself. And the advantage to building one yourself is that you can deliver it in a way that's comfortable for the agents, that has all of the all of the supports all of your messaging to customers, and you can adapt it at will. And so that would be something that we would be able to offer.
And some of the things that I see quite well that works very well from a knowledge perspective now is offering perhaps not all of the information, but a large proportion of the knowledge base, also making it web friendly as well, so that your customers can access certainly not necessarily all, but certainly large parts of the knowledge base for self-serve.
I would say having a different approach. I mean, Carolyn will probably tell me this is the standard approach now for a new contact center, but an approach where your contact center agents are used to not just interrogating the knowledge management system, but updating it and then sharing the relevant pieces of information, whether those are videos or whichever, to the customers that they're speaking to, and allowing the customer to choose what channel that's delivered to them on.
Indeed, yeah, I think some very good advice there. Well, we'll jump across to Carolyn now, and Karen, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on knowledge base, but perhaps if you could also take us through the rest of your presentation as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Collaborate tool with the Interactive Intelligence app, I think, can be a good starting point if somebody doesn't have a knowledge management system already. But I am quite passionate about control of the knowledge management system. And yes, advisors do know stuff and find out stuff that they want to put into the system. But if we have everybody being allowed to make changes and updates, then we can end up with duff information in that system. So I'm really passionate that we still have a single point of contact and control for that. Okay, so just to pick up on this from earlier, we've done a lot on that. So one of the things in particular when it comes to call content and call control that I really am passionate about us doing is making sure that we keep things simple. So if you have got in your contact center, as most places do, a wide range of agents, different personalities, different lengths of service, different amounts of knowledge, different amounts of energy, then you are going to get variance in talk time across these different people. Quite often, the more your agents know, the more they will talk. So the ones who are, really bubbly, who've been there a long time, really knowledgeable, you might find that over time their talk time increases. And this is something to work on in coaching conversations. So again, this is why it links with the quality framework and making sure that the framework drives the right behaviours, which is about, we don't want to gag you and say that you just have to follow a very rigid script. We want you to have good personalised quality conversations with customers, but don't bamboozle people with information that they haven't asked for. And that's a key part of the training that we do. So we will get them to listen to some calls, just like the first 20 seconds of the customer talking, and get them to notice a little bit more about what's going on with that customer. Does this customer sound like they've got time to chat? Do they sound like they're really formal and busy and rushing and efficient themselves? And just kind of sense and respond to those individual changes. And that's really key, that they learn the difference between what we call push communication style, where they just kind of launch into descriptions of things, and then when they use a pull communication style, which is where we would say, ask a question. So before I give you 3 choices of opticians to visit, does this is how many would you like? Do you want 1, do you want 2, or do you want 3? Rather than me just making that decision for you and launching into them. And this is, the optician's example is one that comes from the Boots work that we did. So what we found there was that some agents took 240 seconds to book a customer's optician's appointment, and others took 480. So my job was to understand why that was. And yeah, there were personality differences that accounted for some of that, but a large bulk of that time was people giving 3 optician's appointments, like locations, whereas some people only gave 1 or 2, or said to the customer, where do you live? Where's the best place for you? How many options would you like to know about? And let the customer lead that a little bit more. And yet the 480 seconds, they were like, right, well, your first choice it would be this one, and I think your second choice would be this one, and your third choice would be this one. The customers said nothing. And, they're just, in theory, writing it down. But in half the time, I didn't even know if they were. They just, let the advisor get on with it. And that's not great for customer experience either. So it's about involving that customer a little bit more and thinking about this difference between push and pull communication, so that we don't waste time in calls giving unnecessary information. You know, it's unnecessary to ask if you've got a double garage if I'm sending you a van with a canopy anyway. It's unnecessary for me to tell you about the second or third choice of opticians if you know you're only going to go to that nearest one. So let's cut the fat out of calls. And what's great about speech analytics as well is it converts the voice to text for me, so that I can then go through that with a highlighter pen and kind of really spot where is the excess happening. And then I can use those as handouts in training courses as well. I take my highlighting off and give it to the advisors and say, you tell me where you think the excess fat was, and they go through and they highlight it, and then we time it, and they're absolutely amazed. Like they were going, you know, this advisor, if that was me, I was talking for 2.5 minutes there where I didn't need to. And at the end of the day, after 100 calls or whatever, how drained and exhausted are you? Yeah, I can't speak. I just want to go home and watch Corrie and not talk to anyone. And it's like, well, if I could take out all that unnecessary stuff, would that be better for you? They'd be like, yes. And it would be better for the customer. So that's a big part of what we do. And also really helping them to understand how they listen to avoid repeating themselves in the call. So quite often, and again, I'd love to pick up on this whole, ready and wrap situation, because if we're really looking at AHT the wrong way, what we start to do is we start to squeeze advisors on their wrap time. And so what they then do is they are making notes from the previous call while they're doing the greeting for the next call. And that's when they're missing that important first 20 seconds that I talked about, to know what kind of mood is this customer in, what kind of personality or demographic is this customer. And even worse, if the customer gives me some information that I wasn't quite ready for, it's out of sequence with my system, then I ask you for it again later on, and that's just horrific. It just it's repetitive, it adds to the AHT, and then also it looks like you weren't focused on the customer, and customers hate having to repeat themselves. So absolutely being ready at the start of the call, that first 10 to 20 seconds is so crucial for getting that information and being able to create good rapport right from the word go. So when I go into contact centres, I do ask, kind of let me see what your processes are around wrap time, and if they've been squeezing it, measuring it, targeting it really heavily and beating people up for taking full advantage of it, I do defend it, because I think it's really important to allow your advisors to breathe for a few minutes before they go into the next one, especially when I'm dealing with police contact centres, ambulance services, life insurance claims, medical health insurance claims. There's some tough conversations happening, and just having that opportunity to write up, box off, it's good for first contact resolution, and just to kind of assimilate and get myself ready to start a new call. It's so important. Signposting is something else that I would just want to touch on in terms of keeping control of the call. I'll come back to that. It's absolutely just super simple, but it's a way of making the call flow and keeping control of that, and it can save 10, 20, 30 seconds at a time, which might not sound a lot, but from when you're looking at that cumulatively, it's worth a lot of money to contact centres. So absolutely, after this webinar, I would encourage you to go back and talk about AHT some more. It's not a swear word, and actually having seen that poll where 75% of you are still using it, I know that that's actually quite a good starting point, but let's just make sure we're using it in a positive frame of reference and not a negative one. So here's some evidence of some of the training that we did at the Boots project, where we put stuff around the balance. So we use these little weighing scales as the theme for the training, and we made these posters and we put them up all around the contact centre and in the cloakrooms and toilets and notice boards to get people talking about what this balance was. So I'm ready. I've got some great examples of handling calls efficiently and creating a great customer experience to share. So even without a massive training investment, you could start having a conversation about this in your team meetings, asking people to come to the team meeting with an example of where they think they struck this balance, how did they do it, and let's all learn from that. And this is the acronym, which is what we used at Boots. So being ready, so absolutely, not typing up notes from the previous, actively listening to that customer straight away, liking them. That sounds really basic, but if you don't have good rapport, the call takes longer because it all just escalates and you get hooked arguing with each other. Actioning the customer's need is really important, focusing on what happens next. So summarising, repeating back. Now this is where I don't want to see AHT just getting squeezed for the sake of it, because it will cause repeat call volume if we don't summarise and clarify and the customer goes off with the wrong impression of what's going to happen next, or they forget and then they ring back to ask. So this was really key actually at Autoglass, and we wanted to see an increase in AHT at this point in the call, more mentions of how to check your appointment online. And we were able to use speech analytics to measure before and after the training and see that uplift had happened. I'll touch on that. So controlling the conversation and ending on a good note. So as you can see, in true training consultant style, it spells the word balance. But it's about creating something memorable. So you need to create your own, something that you can hook and create a symbol or a logo or something that people can really kind of keep front of mind. So we made these into A5 desk cards and gave them out to everybody as a takeaway from training so that they could really use the skills, and the training was structured around these areas. We did activities and games in each area so that they could then go away and implement that and keep it in the front of their mind. We also did a wall in the contact centre with all these commitment cards on, where people were saying things like, yeah, learning to like my customers was really important. I can admit that my guard can go up, so I will actively listen and resolve it as effectively as possible. So those are kind of the outcomes and the commitments that we were getting, and that's what just helps to oil the wheels of rapport and keep that call ticking along a bit more smoothly and a bit more quickly. So we got them to listen to calls. Why is this customer calling? What's their mood? How could it have been made more efficient? And if we made that efficiency, would that have made the customer experience better or worse? And you know what? When we look at what makes it more efficient, it's always making the customer experience better, because we're not putting them on hold. There isn't, kind of those bamboozling, overcomplicating sections. People want to get on, get their thing done and leave. So get on with their day. So when it comes to actioning the customer's need, the key takeaways we really encouraged advisors to have was to focus on action that you need to take, not the discussion you may feel compelled to have. So there were a lot of advisors going into a lot of detail explaining why they were doing what they were doing that the customer didn't need to know. Their customer just needed to know what was going to happen next to get this fixed. What's the solution here? Not all the internal politics or kind of departmental detail. They just didn't need to know that. So not overcomplicating things, just simply sorting out what they called for as quickly and as clearly as you can is a really key message. Making sure that advisors are purposeful, that they're not lethargic in their energy, and that we avoid minimal silences. So we're not just targeting here kind of the chatty advisors, but also the ones who are a little bit, taking my time, tones a bit flat. So that was also really key. We wanted them to sit up and have a bit more energy and make sure that they were on the ball a little bit more. We've talked about the knowledge management system, but for this client as well, the gesture of goodwill was really important. So rather than putting customers on hold while you go and ask a team manager if you can do something like, £5 credit or whatever, just do it. There's a policy here which says say yes for things under this amount, and we wanted to make sure that people were reminded of that in the training and that they went away and used it. Because actually when you look at the costs of putting customers on hold, tapping into team managers, the £5 has been spent internally. Why, we've got to think of indirect costs at times as well. So that was another great.
We're just running a little short of time, so I just know that you want to touch a bit on signposting, which is
that one, yeah. So there's just literally, this is about in a moment. So take that phrase, in a moment, and put it into your calls. In a moment, I'm going to put you through to a payment line. You're going to need a card. In a moment, I'm going to give you a reference number. You're going to need a pen. So those little takeaways will stop customers rummaging around their house for pens and credit cards and things like that, because you've just given them that little heads up. and that again will save time in your calls. These two projects, they got 60 seconds at Boots and at Autoglass 30 seconds, but also what I got with this one was that the previously fastest agents have increased their AHT, but then the repeat call volume has come down by 2%. And that's the true, that for me means more than just getting a 30 or a 60-second reduction in AHT, because that really shows me not only have we got the efficiency, but we've got the balance there, we've got the effectiveness. We're actually getting some advisors to take longer and to get it right first time. So yeah, that's me done.
Wonderful, thank you very much for that. We've got a number of questions and comments have come in on the back of that. Let's just have a look at some of those coming through. I think Alistair is really tied in. So when looking at call and content interactions, do believe that proper efficiency coaching must take place. I've met a number of team leaders, managers, coaches who coach on customer experience and customer satisfaction, but totally missed out on the efficiency opportunities. Not only agent efficiencies, but also system and process opportunities, which I guess really summarises a lot of what you were saying, Caroline.
Yeah, and any project like this, we always start with the team managers and coaches, and we pull the quality teams in as well. It's absolutely key.
Excellent. Well, question for Leon. Is there a clear return on investment for using voice analytics in a small contact centre? And where is the clear ROI from voice analytics? And where is the clear ROI from?
Probably two areas. Then it would be your quality team, and I would, I'm guessing a small contact center is no smaller than 35, maybe 50 agents. That would be a smaller center to us. There is still very much an ROI on a quality team that is dealing with beige calls that Carolyn kind of mentioned earlier. All the stuff in the middle that doesn't really need managing. So the impact they can make at the extremes, the very good and the very bad calls, is much more impactful. The other thing is that real-time speech analytics can capture negative experiences for customers, and you can retain those customers. So yeah, we do have ROI, and if Hannah wants to get in touch, that'd be great.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it'd be good to know, Hannah, what industry you're in, if she puts that in the chat room, because if it's cash collection, the ROI on that is mega. Where if it's retail, we can find cross-sell and upsell opportunities. If it's healthcare or IT service desk stuff, then it tends to be repeat call volume reductions. So to answer the question, we kind of need to know where you are.
But certainly, I think in experience, it is more difficult on a smaller contact center, but not impossible. It's easier if you've got an all-in-one platform like the interactive platform, rather than if you're trying to buy it as a bolt-on item, which can be more expensive. Let's have a look at tips from the audience. Sean says, we've recently started sharing average handling time, sales conversion, and customer satisfaction with staff, which is to enable them to self-regulate and benchmark their performance across the department. Akin to no point asking someone to drive at 50 miles an hour and not give them a speedometer.
I love that. That's a really great analogy. I'm having that. I'm going to use that.
So let's have a look. Jessica says, occupancy is something you should leverage for planning, and it is, again, a balance. You don't want associates to be over-occupied and drive negative behaviour. Agent morale issues or even attrition. I believe it's what was being referenced about in the ready time, so that was quite an interesting one. Rob says it's generally accepted that chat contact is cheaper than voice, but ultimately should be driven by the customer. Chat has improved the experience through the sales journey, but chat will not deflect your volume of contacts unless you improve the experience. It simply offers customer convenience and at a lower cost to serve. I think, Leon, there's a danger that companies tend to offer chat almost and then pull the telephone away because it's cheaper rather than giving a better service. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you've got, if there's an outcome that you can achieve by probably about 3 rounds of chat, that's what you're aiming at. You don't want a chat to go on, and sometimes it's better for the customer service agent to prompt a telephone call, and if they can kind of make that happen from their single workstation, that is all the better. What is terrible is if you're having a chat conversation, it's not going anywhere, and then the customer says, look, can I just call you? And you get that customer says no, computer says no, answer, oh, I'm a chat agent, I don't do voice. You need multi-channel agents, you need them to be driving the conversation. And
we've got one last comment. We've got many more comments, which we'll circulate to our panelists. Dana says, I find wallboards really annoying when it shows calls in queues. It just pressures the agent into rushing calls, which inevitably leads to mistakes, which lead to repeat contacts. Carolyn, I certainly see there's less wallboards with queues on when I walk around these days.
Yeah, but I love that thing about you expect people to drive at 50 miles an hour and don't give them a speedometer. I think that is the thing about personalisation and flexibility. It does take as long as it takes, but I want you to have that awareness. If there's people waiting in the queue, don't be chatting for 10 minutes about what you're doing at the weekend or when you went on holiday to Wales or whatever with that customer. It's people waiting.
It's really useful to have that in the breakout room, where people see the queues and then think, oh, I'd better get back to my desk. Okay, that's all the time we've got for now. So in one or two words, if you'd like to put into the chat room, what did you like best about today's webinar? So if you could type that into the chat room. The replay and slides are available later on today, callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. And it's still time to register for the next webinars in our series. So just like to say a very much thank you to our two expert presenters today. Carolyn, thank you very much to you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us, Leon.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
And we're going to be back in 2 weeks' time when we're going to be looking at designing customer journeys. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.